right.
Welcome to the smartest people in the room. We are glad you are here, and just by showing up, you're already demonstrating your very own smarts. Today, I am pleased to present two of the most well-known and respected music execs that I know, and two that represent the best of what this platform is all about. I promise you will leave smarter and more enlightened than you arrived. Before we get started, please let me take care of some business. First, to the audience, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat window. The reason we do these webinars is twofold. First, we want to showcase really smart people and the amazing work they do day to day in the music industry. The second reason is a bit more nuanced. Many of you know that I'm a music industry headhunter. I run the music practice at Turnkey ZRG, and I place music executives in roles throughout the industry. So by definition and function, I help people connect with companies. In this series, my goal is to help you make more connections, and I invite you to take full advantage of that opportunity. Specifically, I invite you to engage with the speakers and the other attendees in the chat of the Zoom. Please introduce yourselves, share your LinkedIn profile, say hello to your friends, and make some new ones. And ask questions of our speakers. We will try to address as many of those as possible during the session. Also, please make sure your chat is set to address everyone, not just the host and speakers. I want to thank our program sponsors. For without their support, we could not do this for free. Special thank you to First Horizon Bank, Turnkey ZRG, the Tennessee Entertainment Commission, MedJet, Tennessee Brew Works, Project Music, and Better Than Booze. So let's get down to business. In today's host seat, we welcome back my good friend and multiple-time host, David Hazan. David, for over 30 years, has been a leading force in the intersection of music, tech, entertainment, and events, growing the brands and businesses of his clients who have ranged from startups to legacy media. David's deep experience in music marketing includes senior record label positions held at Warner, Putumayo, Universal, and Wind Up, as well as executive roles at VH1, The Orchard, EMCI, and Medem. His current and recent clients include Sound Exchange, Spin, Audio Shake, Bandzoogle, Found.ee, and Canadian Music Week, among dozens of others. David is a frequent speaker and interviewer and moderator at leading global industry events and has curated more than 50 physical and virtual panels in recent years, including Wallifornia, Music Biz, South by Southwest, Music Tectonics, Mondo, Medem, NOLA Music Tech, IEG, Fest Forums, Moo.com, Indie Week, and Canadian Music Week, where he also produces 2 hackathons. It is also his 7th time hosting one of these events. I'm going to get you a special jacket like they give Saturday Night Live hosts.
I'll take a
And
watch.
joining David as today's featured guest is another David, David Fritz. David is founding partner of Boyarsky Fritz LLP and a co-founder of Creative Intel, a tech and educational platform for the media and entertainment industries. A seasoned entertainment and multimedia lawyer, David is founding partner of Boyarsky Fritz, a full-service boutique law firm with offices in Manhattan and LA, whose clients include Mark Anthony, Joan Jett, Lil Tecca, the Prince Estate, and Earth, Wind, and Fire, with areas of practicing encompassing music, film, TV, technology, media, branding, intellectual property, licensing, employment, and corporate law. Additionally, David co-holds 2 patents designed for use by Creative Intel, an AI-powered deal-making platform that revolutionizes efficiencies and collaboration among creators, attorneys, and business partners by enabling them to draft, negotiate, sign, report, and learn all on one platform. Creative Intel recently launched an online academy and community dedicated to teaching the music business and its contracts. David holds a Bachelor of Arts in Economics from George Washington University in Washington, D.C., and a minor in Fine Arts. He received his JD from Hofstra University, New York School of Law in New York, where he is an adjunct professor. It is my pleasure to welcome these 2 rock stars to our platform. Please take it away, boys.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Tom. What's
Thanks
up, David?
everyone for tuning in. David, you've worked with Prince. Okay, before we get to the beginning, I'd like you to tell us the weirdest story that we've never heard about Prince, the weirder the better.
Well, the Prince and our relationship with Prince came from my former father-in-law, Charles Koppelman. And he was, at the time, he was chairman of EMI. It was when Prince had written "Slave Across His Face" because his deal with Warner Brother Records back in the day provided that once he left Warner Brothers, he had a period where he couldn't record new albums using the name Prince. So he said, well, why don't I call myself the artist formerly known as, because he was allowed to refer to himself that way, as that symbol. So when Prince was actually free to make a record deal, he had called Charles and said, listen, I want to meet you. You're chairman of EMI. We should meet and talk. So you're going to get a call back from somebody, and when you do, we're gonna set up the meeting. So about an hour later, he gets a call, and the call is meet me on the side of the road in Beverly Hills at this specific time. So Charles pulls up in his car. There's another car waiting, pulls up behind it. Out comes a guy from the car, comes up to Charles. Are you Charles Koppelman? Yes. Wait here. He waits there. It's about 10 minutes. Now, you're waiting in the back of a car 10 minutes when there's a car in front of you. Like, it's kind of like bizarro, right? And 10 minutes later, the guy came back and he says, okay, you could follow me back to the car. Charles follows him into the car. It was a limo, and they talked about making a new record together in the back of Prince's limo in Beverly Hills. The deal was ultimately crafted. It was a first in the sense that he said, I need to have total creative control. I need it to be a 3-album single release all at once, which, as most people know, like the largest release you usually get is a double album at most, if not a single album, obviously. But it was a triple album, and it went on to becoming, critically acclaimed as you know. I forgot the name of the album, but I know you know it.
Emancipation.
Right, Emancipation. Right.
Because of the slave, right?
Absolutely, because he had been broken of slavery from the release. Absolutely. So
yeah. I was thinking, I wonder how Prince would be using AI at a time like this, because you can't have any conversations in the business without it getting into AI. I wonder what he would do. Do you have any?
I think he would have been pushing the envelope on creativity. I think he would have been doing everything he could, and his output, as like the guy was known for his output, that he just had this phenomenal amount of, music that's like still in vaults that's unreleased. He's got tons and tons of high quality music that just never seen the light of day. I think it would just be even more of it. And what could he do with it, and what would be the image? I think it, I don't know if he would have released more product during his lifetime, but he certainly would have been playing and using all the cutting edge tools to make more and better art, because that's what he lived. He was all about his art, expressing what he felt and making it move.
Look what he did with drum machines. I mean, drum machines sounded like garbage, and then When Doves Cry comes out, and that sounded, still to this day, what's a better drum machine programming example than that? Let's go back to the beginning. How old were you, David, when you got bitten by the music bug, and what were the circumstances? And keep it clean.
What was it? I guess you go to college and you have all this free time on your hand and you're listening to a lot of music. So I'm a child of the 80s. So I was an MTV kid growing up. I don't know if I remember like the first day of MTV, because I don't know if my parents had cable that day, but like certainly within the first year I had MTV, and growing up, listening to, all those 80s, new wave music. And then I got to college and really got moved by the Dead and the whole jam band scene and the Radiators. So I had, I'd seen the Dead at least 80 times. I've seen the Rads at least, I don't know, 60 times. And my father was in the watch business, and I made logo watches for the Radiators. And, would go backstage at, small venues, 2,000 seaters at, like that time, that's like what they were playing. And, was going backstage and hanging out with the band because I was the merch guy with the watches, making logo watches for them. And and by the way, they were the worst watches. They were stereotypical, like what you'd buy in the back of a catalog, with like a gold watch that the gold would come off after a couple of years and the leather would be worn. But that's what, that was what logo watches were in those days.
But you sold them to fans at the gigs.
Yeah, well, it wasn't that the fans weren't buying them. The band was using it for its inner circle and business partners and
VIP gifts.
They were using them inside. Yeah. So I haven't seen them on eBay yet. I'd be curious as to what they'd be going for today.
So what was the transition from your early entrepreneurial roots with music and transitioning that to your first job in the industry? I think you worked for Alan Grubman to start.
Yeah, I worked for the Grubman firm right out of law school, and my thought of what it was going to be like, I thought it was going to be like Ari Goldin and, kicking your feet up and talking on the phone, and, it was going to be like this craziness. And it was all about drafting. It was, how do you, hone in and, do this really crazy, intense drafting to know every word and every sentence. I mean, you get to a point, and this is not just me, but I'm sure any seasoned entertainment lawyer, you can give them, today a laptop and say, go draft a record deal. And they probably could get pretty much all the concepts, and draft it in pretty good order, because you commit it to memory. You just commit like how concepts work. So, but in those days, it was hardcore. It was a kill or be killed environment at the Grubman firm, especially for young guys. I was in my late 20s, early 30s, and it was like, go back to your cage and go do that work. Like, we don't want to talk to you. I remember in 1998, I had represented Evan and Jaron, that had a hit called "Crazy for This Girl," and I did the deal. They had made, it was a really, really big deal, and I walk into Artie and Dursky's office, and I'm like, Artie, here's a check for $50,000. That's our legal fees. And like, I think I may have gotten I had like a salary back then of like 200,000. So I'm like, Artie, I just made 25% of my salary. I know there's more costs. I got 25% of my salary in this one check, Artie. How good is that? And he was like, $50,000. Are you fucking kidding me? Like, get out of my office. Go back to work.
Were those early experiences, were you reflecting on those when you and Steven Shipp came up with Creative Intel, and how between AI tools that are available and what you're in the process of developing and unleashing with Creative Intel, that would have made for a different experience?
Absolutely.
What would it be like now for someone in their late 20s and early 30s to have to do what you had to do then? Because the same functions need to be filled.
No question. Well, I would have learned a lot quicker. We're building the tool that I wanted from that point and even till today. So from one standpoint, I would have, obviously I read Passman's book, which was around back then, and learned everything. But, if you look at Passman's book, it's siloed. First learn recorded music, then learn music publishing, then learn merchandise, then learn live. But that's not the career. The career, well, at least today, obviously, is you're doing YouTube videos, you're doing a cover song, you're posting on SoundCloud, or, using a distributor like TuneCore or The Orchard or whatever, to upload music to DSPs. So you need to know a little bit of a lot of subjects and go wider and deeper as you move along in the journey, as opposed to knowing very deep on recorded music and very deep on music publishing in those. So we take the user on the same journey of start out light and go deep, as you go through that journey. Because that's how the career works.
Why don't we talk about creative intel for a couple of minutes now? Because I know it's a big part of what you're doing besides your normal day-to-day client practice.
Yep.
What made you want to come up with the idea for creative intel besides your own experiences, and what do you think the needs are out there that creative intel will be addressing?
Well, Steve Shipp and I were having lunch, every single day because I had given him office space inside my law practice to use when he was developing a project that he, needed office space. So I was telling him that I'd get calls from young talent and it would be Groundhog's Day and it would be, some young kid, late teens, early 20s, or their parents. And they're recording, they're writing, they're making videos, they're doing all these things, and someone's giving them a contract that needs to be reviewed, or they need to give a contract to somebody who's asking for a contract. And when you're dealing with people that young, they're not in the workforce for a long period of time. They don't have savings. And the first thing that every entertainment lawyer does, including me, is you pick up the phone and go, what are your stream counts? And unless you have millions of stream counts, you have no money. So what you're saying to those people are, listen, I'd love to help you, but I need a $3,000, $5,000, $10,000 retainer to get started, because given what the needs are at the time, and you're telling that to someone that doesn't have money. So as a result of that, I recognized that, and I'm telling this to Steve early on, that, look, there's this problem there. And part of the problem can be solved with education. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I'll get a call in the morning and it'll be some manager saying, I think I'm getting fired by my client. How does my post-term participation work in my management agreement? And then you go through that for 20 minutes. And then in the afternoon, you get a call from a new artist that's signing the management agreement for the first time saying, so what happens if I fire the manager? How does that all work? And you got to explain post-term participation to that manager. So, I could have saved 40 minutes, the 20 in the morning and the 20 in the afternoon, by having an education that we could point to and say, listen, why don't you learn this little education from this source and then call me back and we'll go through your specific needs, but at least you'll get the basics of what's term product and term services and, how sunsets generally work. So we had that education, issue there. And Steve and I early on in this journey were saying, listen, what do we do? Do we, are we going to give a contract? Let's say you need a management agreement. Do we give the user who we build this education for, do we give them a copy of a management agreement that says, use this paragraph, except if this happens, then use this paragraph. And if that's not the case, then use this paragraph. So what you have is a 5-page Word document for a normal management agreement is 30, 40 pages because you got to delete out, paragraphs that don't apply and find the one that does. So what I said was you can't give non-lawyers that language because it's like giving keys to a Ferrari to a kid who took driver's ed, right? You took driver's ed. Here's keys to the Ferrari. Go take it for a spin. You know enough about how it works on the road. So, and then Steve, while that's happening, is trying to edit footage that we were playing around with, and he's learning the software of how to edit. And he's like, why? And he's cutting back and forth to YouTube to learn the function of the pull downs. So he's like, why is that not embedded right into the editing software, the education of how to use the software within the software? And that's when we honed in and said, what we have to do is create a document assembly program that has all the common variations of the music business with the embedded education in it, so you could teach people what the nuances are, what the deal structures are, how things are different so that they can, you know, manage their legal with, you know, as an individual creator, as a manager, as a lawyer, and do it in unison so that the product is kind of like QuickBooks or Carter or, you know, Google Docs, or, you know, where you can all be using it at the same time, which speeds up workflow. So, and that was the important part, is like, how do you just get more done today? Because, you know, it's not just, you know, indie artists that are using the latest and greatest tools. So are professional, you know, signed talent doing that. So it's never been easier than ever before to create and release content. So, you know, what's the slowest piece of it? The lawyers are the slowest piece of the puzzle, just because you can't, it's not efficient to use Microsoft Word, Dropbox, DocuSign, go find concepts in your form files of something you got to swap out. Where did I use that last? You know, it's just inefficient. You can put it all together much easier. And, you know, the idea is that the lawyers would be able to use this. So it's a tool for all stakeholders in the music business, ultimately.
And lawyers are going to be using this. It'll save them time as well, from what I have heard.
100%, 100%. And we got a bunch of, you know, top lawyers that are investors of ours that are already, you know, on board with using it, that aren't investors of ours. So the idea is that, you know, we're not looking to do anything other than, you know, cater to every stakeholder group that's out there in the music business, make everybody's life easier.
And people can access these tools now or soon, or, you
No,
know?
soon. Right now we have the education. So what we did is we took that education that we built and we put it into a freestanding e-learning platform, and that's at creativeintel.com, and 2 L's on Intel. In the next several months, we'll launch the chatbot and the companion features that let you, you know, send it on platform and revise it on platform and redline it and data mine. Ultimately, you do all your deals, you can run reports. So you want to see, you know, you did 10 producer agreements for 10 tracks on an album, and you want to see what were the total advances that were paid, you know, for the album. You can run a report on that. You want to see, you know, what are the songwriter splits on that album? Well, maybe it's in separate songwriter split agreements, it's in producer agreements, it's in side artists. It pulls that all together. And then ultimately, can we take that data and pipe it into record, you know, royalty systems and music publishers and PROs? How can that data be shared so that it gets rid of manual entry and speeds up the process to enable everybody to collect money faster?
That's great. All right. So let's pick up where we left off historically. One of the artists that you worked with closely early in your career was Joan Jett. What was that like? How was she to work with? And there was an unusual partnership with her producer manager, Kenny Laguna.
Yeah, you know, Joan's amazing. And, you know, Kenny Laguna is literally one of the most influential people in my career. I owe a lot of what I learned from him. You know, what he was really great at was seeing things that other people didn't see and didn't have a way of. You know, it was just different because he was so entrepreneurial. So, like, I'll give you an example. Is that, you know, Kenny. You know, most people aren't thinking about the fact that, like, if you're in your own business, you know, you're not making the same amount of money every day. You know, like, some months may be higher, some may be lower. Maybe you have a great year, maybe you have a bad year. So what Kenny would do back in those days is that Joan has been an independent artist her entire career. She was signed to Boardwalk Records for her first album. Boardwalk went out of business because Neil Bogart died. She got the rights back to that first album, and she remained independent since that date. And what Kenny used to do is he would take those records, you know, this is pre-streaming days, and he would license the albums, her catalog, on a territory by territory basis. So he'd make a deal for England, he'd make a deal for Germany, Austria, Switzerland, he'd make a deal for, you know, Eastern Europe. He'd make a deal for Central and South America and Asia and Australia, and have these different deals in place.
Are those the
And
types of deals at Meetup that used to happen? that
correct,
everybody talks
exactly, both on recorded music and music publishing side. So first, by having all these deals, they didn't cross collateralize. He didn't make one giant deal that was global. In that he instead made these individual deals that didn't cross collateralize. The other thing that he did was he would let the terms run. So let's say that he had a 3-year deal and the 3 years passed. He wouldn't call the company and say, hey, listen, my deal's up. You got to stop. I'm moving on. He would, or like, we got to talk about a new advance. He would just let them account and continue to pay him and pay Joan as, you know, continuing. And then what would happen is Joan would decide, you know, in a given year, you know what, I want to like take 6 months off and not go and not perform live. I'm going to just take some time off the road. I'm going to go, you know, write some new music and record. So now you don't have that money coming in. So what Kenny would do would be, and if he saw this and he needed cash for whatever reason, he would call up one of those licensees and be like, oh, listen, you know, our deal was up like a year ago. We got to extend it now and I need an advance. So he would be able to pull on these deals, you know, without actually having to do anything. And he already had it all set up.
like a global ATM network.
What? I'm sorry?
Like a global ATM network.
Totally. That's exactly what it was. It was so smart the way that he had it set up.
And that was unusual. That's not how people did it back in the 80s when they had catalogs to shop around territory by territory. What was different about how Kenny did it?
A label did, but Joan was a single artist label.
It was artist specific. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
You know, and then labels, you know, also they would all be, you know, if you think about it, if you're an employee of a company, you want to pull the cash in as soon as possible because your own employment agreement is probably tied to the success of your the quarter or the year. So you're going to actually, it's going to be the inverse. So you're going to want to pull that cash in as quick as possible. Oh gosh, I got a term coming up next month. Let me renew and get that cash in now right away because I wanted to hit my books so that I get credit for it from my employment agreement. So it's the inverse, you know, when you're dealing with companies. But when you're an entrepreneur and it's your own company, it was a very interesting approach to learn from.
So I think of him as a writer and a producer more than an innovative business person. How did I Love Rock and Roll, a song she didn't write, which was huge for her? How did that come about? How was that identified and launched?
I forgot the story of I Love Rock and Roll, but like there, you know, I'll tell you one sleeper hit that she had. She re-recorded the Mary Tyler Moore theme song, and it's amazing, and everybody should check it out. You know, but
like
yeah,
fast punk.
Absolutely.
I can hear
Jason Boyarsky and I though were backstage with Joan at the Tonight Show when she was performing a bunch of years ago. And actually, I take it back. It wasn't at the Tonight Show. We were at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and Joan's such a perfectionist. She was in, Foo Fighters. She was playing with Foo Fighters, and she's backstage and she's and literally Jason and I are looking at each other like we're watching Joan play this, and it's like this is like insane. It was amazing, and she is having a full meltdown of how she is having a hard time performing it. It sucks, and literally Jason and I are like, Joan, like that was mind altering. What you just replicated it. Like this is crazy, but. And you couldn't tell her because she's a perfectionist. She heard things that we didn't hear, but it was great. It was great.
That wasn't the Nirvana Rock Hall induction, was it? When Nirvana played?
No, it was. Yeah, no, it was. And she played with Foo Fighters for the induction.
Yeah, that was great. I remember that. How did Crimson and Clover turn up? Did Kenny Laguna have a connection with Tommy James and the Shondells? Because
they were friends actually. You know, Kenny. What's not known about Kenny is Kenny produced "I Want Candy" for Bow Wow Wow, and Kenny was a kid he was like the youngest kid in the Brill Building era, and running around in, like, I guess it would be past doo-wop, but he's for someone that manages Joan, who's such the queen of rock and roll. Kenny was more of a candy music guy, like throwaway hits, but yeah, it's funny thinking of, it's so funny you get pigeonholed in what people think you are versus what you are in the music business, unless you're one of those people that go from one extreme to the other in the talent that you work with.
And I had no idea that Kenny produced the Bow Wow Wow, "I Want Candy," which was of course written by Richard Goddard, founder of the Orchard and everything else. So,
and they were good friends. They're good friends. Yeah, totally. I didn't realize that Richard Goddard wrote that. That's funny.
Yeah, Strange Loves.
Yeah. Funny.
Australian, the Australian Jewish.
Very cool. Very cool.
So let's talk about Mark Anthony now, because he's such a unique artist and just done it all. I don't really know that much about him other than he's awesome. I know his live performances are supposed to be life-changing for a lot of people, and he's done so much in branding and licensing. But yeah, catch me up.
Totally. Well, musically, if you think in terms of that, Mark is the Spanish language Frank Sinatra, and think about that what does that mean to Spanish speaking people? Like, he is what Frank is to English speaking in the world. That's what Mark is to Spanish language music. He's got this incredible voice, this amazing swagger. He's like a great performer. So musically, that's what Mark is. And then, like, in business, he's like Jay-Z. His partners, Michelle Vega and Felipe Pimiento, they have this great business called Magnus Media out of Miami. And if you're on 95 heading south into Miami, and you're at like 98th Street, you'll see Magnus, a giant Magnus building. So they have on the ground floor, it's a performance center, which is like a bar and a riser where bands can play, and it's mic'd. It's got a recording studio. So it's got this great, where you can do live things and set up and shoot video and all that. It's like this great production room, and they have all events there. Like Spotify Miami does events there. Really interesting companies that are in Miami use the space. Then the second floor is the Magnus's offices, and then the third floor is Mark's man cave. So it's a shrine with Grammys and every award he's ever done, and pictures of him with presidents, and really, really great stuff. And
what other business is Magnus involved in besides managing Mark's career and licenses? And
so they have a record label, and the first artist that they broke is a group out of the Dominican Republic, and Cuba, that is, called Gente de Zona, and they have a publishing company. They have a great they have a big talent booking agency called Magnus Talent Agency, MTA, because Michelle Vega came from WME. He ran WME's Miami office. So they got a great roster there, and they just recently purchased an agency out of Spain. So they have like a global footprint on their agency business. They have a drink brand. Mark's had clothing deals with Kohl's, and he's got a sports deal with Electric Boat Racing E1, and he just did the national anthem this past weekend for F1. He's got a lot going on.
A new album. That's
And
quite traditional sounding. It was a little different from what I was expecting. I did get the chance to listen to that. It sounded
yeah,
cool.
yeah. Ole Ole is the first single on that, which is amazing. Current single, that is. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
When you mentioned Frank Sinatra a minute ago, it reminded me of the Mob Hits project that you spearheaded, and that's its own thing completely. That's not a typical artist deal. It's also not a typical compilation deal. So tell us about Mob Hits because I only know bits and pieces.
Yeah, so in the late '90s, I had this idea to, it was at a time when, if you wanted to go deep dive into a subgenre of music, you had to buy a lot of CDs. And I had purchased I looked into the the albums of The Godfather, Goodfellas, Casino, Donnie Brasco, but those were more score records. But they weren't actually releasing the music that was in the films. So I actually was driving to the office one day. I was actually with Charles, and I said, listen, I got this idea that, to put all the music from all those great movies onto a single compilation. Had his morning cigar in his mouth, and he takes it out and goes, you should call it Mob Hits. And I go, that's the name of the record. In fact, it's a gold album cover. It's got bullet holes in it, and I'm going to put it on television. And he was like, calm down. And I'm like, no, I'm going to do this. So I turned to one of my closest friends, Roy Weissman, who was Elliot Weissman's son, who Elliot managed Frank Sinatra.
Right.
And I turned to him and I say, I call him up and I'm like, Roy, I got this idea. So I want to do Mob Hits on TV. Let's do it together. And he goes, great. We're doing it together. He goes, I'm going to tell my dad, because he and his father were partners. I'm going to tell my dad, how much money do you think we're going to need? I don't know. You put up 75, I'll put up 75. We'll raise 150,000 bucks. That'll do the job. So he's like,
for advances, right?
Yeah, for licensing and inventory and making the television commercial, all of that. So he calls me back 2 hours later. He goes, my father fucking killed me. He would crush me. I go, what happened? He goes, Roy, are you fucking kidding? We can't be partners with Fritz on a record called Mob Hits managing Frank. There's no way. We're not doing it. There's no way. Call him back. We're not doing it. So I'm like, all right. So I ended up still doing the record.
And you called it Mob Hits.
Called it Mob Hits, and
Elliot wasn't pissed off?
No, well, Frank's not on the record. Frank's
okay.
No, but it's music by Dean Martin, Al Martino, Louis Prima, Jerry Vale, who appeared in, did the television commercial with us. He was on the record. But there is another funny Frank story that's attached to it, which is I got a claim letter from Sinatra's estate like 2 or 3 years after I released it. And what happened was, if you called the 800 number to place your order for the record, and you and you place the order, the way that it works in infomercials, or people don't really call today to place orders like they did. Now it's all online. But the way that it worked is, the first thing they say to you is, what's your credit card number? So like, they got your credit card number. Okay, how many copies do you now want? So now you could just say one and hang up, and your order got placed. But if you stay on the phone, they're going to upsell you more products. So once we took the initial order of Mob Hits, how many copies do you want? We would say, we have a special today. We have Frank Sinatra's greatest hits record. How many copies of that do you want? And the Sinatra estate got pissed off that people were calling to place orders for Mob Hits, and then we were, upselling Frank Sinatra's greatest hits record as a compilation. So, I just came up with it was just off the top of my head, and I responded back to the estate saying, listen, me putting Mob Hits on as an upsell on and reading a script to a consumer that places an order for Mob Hits is no different than I own a record store and I'm going to put Mob Hits next to Frank Sinatra's album. So when people see one, they see the other. So I'm sorry, you got no claim. Bye.
That was it.
Yeah, that was it. Never heard again. That was my first claim letter.
And did you do a bunch of different spots, one core spot that got the job done? Did you do long form, short form content? I mean, this is right when all this stuff was.
Yeah, we toyed around with it, but I didn't maximize it. You know, to be honest with you, what was interesting and unfortunate, for not for us, but is that when 9/11 happened, it was like 2 or 3 years into selling the record. And the climate changed. It wasn't funny to be putting out a record called Mob Hits.
Yeah,
and it just the sentiment changed. And when that changed, streaming media started coming on. So like compilation records, people weren't buying them. In fact, it's like no different than today with soundtrack albums. There really aren't soundtrack albums. There are soundtrack playlists, but there aren't really soundtrack albums. That like business isn't as impactful like as the way back in the day of like The Bodyguard, when that would be like a giant soundtrack album.
How many units did you sell of Mob Hits at the end of the day?
Well, we did Mob Hits 2, 3, Doo-Wop, Christmas. So among the 5 volumes, we probably have done I don't know, 4 million albums. So it was a good lucky first strike.
That's great. All right, let's jump forward into the present. I believe when you got Little Tech assigned a couple of years ago, it was the highest advance paid to a new artist signing from any major label that year.
It was big. It was big. It was a big advance. And at the time that we signed him, that he got signed, he had his manager and business partner is a guy named Giuseppe Zappala, who is like he's one of the best at starting at point zero and getting it to 1 and beyond. So he had made a deal with Lyrical Lemonade, which was a tastemaker YouTube site back then, and had Lyrical Lemonade directed his video, and they put the video on their YouTube channel. And literally on the first day of release of the song Ransom, it had 1 million streams. And then the second day, it had another 1 million streams. And then another 1 million. And by the 7th day, it was literally, I was getting calls from every label in the country saying, how do I make a deal? It was literally within the first week of release of that track.
Just from this one tastemaker, is Lyrical Lemonade still?
Yeah, Lyrical Lemonade's still around, still a tastemaker, and I forgot the name of the principal's name at Lyrical Lemonade, but it was he's a big video director today and does all different multimedia things. So
I wonder how many other sites there are like Lyrical Lemonade that can single-handedly do that for an artist. Obviously, the track
not a lot. Yeah,
that's
totally
unusual. So totally. Let's go back to other artists that you've worked with or represented that would have some historical significance for us music fans out here.
Well, I represented David Lee Roth in trying to put Van Halen back together. That was an interesting time. David is like amazingly witty, has a crazy life. When he gets into something, he wants to become an emergency medic. He becomes an emergency medic. He wants to learn chess and be a chess master. He'll become a chess master. He's multi-denominational in martial arts. When I went to visit his house, he lives in Pasadena. The gates open up and I drive in and it looks like an overgrown drug lord estate. It's got palm trees growing out of palm trees. And you got to like drive to get in like this. He's got an outdoor gym that's, rotting from rust, but meanwhile, he uses it every day. And I'm hanging out with him and his manager at the time. And we're going to go out for dinner. David's going to the house to change. Manager says, let me show you around. We go from his house. We walk down a flight of steps and then through bushes. And all of a sudden, it's this beautiful, amazing pool. That's like totally great setup. Go around the pool. Got to go open up the bushes again. Go down a flight of steps. And it's a rectangular section of sand with a trampoline in the center. What they did was David took the trampoline and filled sand up on a tennis court so that you literally can walk out on the sand onto the trampoline. And David calls that the beach. When he's going, I got to go to the beach. When David goes to the beach, that means he's going to go practice his kicks. So I obviously I play on the trampoline. Now I'm, like this is like 10 minutes the whole down tour. Now we're going to go meet David. I walk back up towards his house, and all of a sudden I fall into quicksand. There is legit quicksand at his house. I'm 2 legs in deep. I have to use my arms to pull one leg at a time out. I get out of the quicksand. My shoes are in the quicksand. I have to go into the quicksand to pull them out. You can imagine, like mud everywhere. And
I'm trying to have a meeting and you're up to your knees in mud. Was he there laughing? Like,
so David wasn't there when I fell into it, but when I came to meet him, he was laughing hysterical. Oh, you fell into the quicksand. Like, thanks for telling me. It's like, obviously this is part of his routine to have his people fall into the quicksand at his house. So they hosed me off and I was, drenched and like muddy going to dinner with him and his manager.
That's great. That's funny.
So, yeah.
You were talking about his rusted gym. I used to read far too much rock journalism, and David Lee Roth had one of my favorite lines when he said he tried running, but the ice kept falling out of his glass.
Right. Totally. Totally. Well, if anybody wants to Google this, David said to me, listen, at the height of my career, in the late 70s, I needed bodyguards. And he said to me, but my bodyguards only see elbows and assholes. And I go, what? He goes, my bodyguards only see elbows and assholes, but they're total like crazy black belts. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, oh, they're only this high. And they were, I don't know the correct PC way of saying it today.
I know what
but they were this high. And if anybody Googles David Lee Roth and his bodyguards, you could see David's legit bodyguards that traveled with him at all times during, the David Lee Roth days of Van Halen.
Wow. That must have been a master class in negotiation, trying to get, people that didn't see each other very much, like what was that? Is there anything that you can share about the actual negotiations, what people were asking for and expecting and bringing?
I mean, with putting Van Halen back together.
Yeah.
It was a war of egos at the time. It all cleared up because obviously Van Halen didn't come together again on my watch. I wish they did. But they didn't. But I would say that my time in helping, cleared part of the path and made amends on the way to get it all back together again.
That's good.
Yeah.
Was there something with Tracy Chapman that you were mentioning in the pre-call?
Yeah. So, we just happened to hit on Tracy and, and I was saying that, Charles had signed her and I heard the whole stories there that were just great stories coming back, where everything is today. But my, Brian Koppelman, was at, Tufts University and, he had saw Tracy perform at a coffee shop, and he calls his father and he's like, Dad, you gotta sign this girl. You gotta come up here. And he's like, all right, Brian, I'll check her out at some point. And then happens again. Yeah, I'll come check her out. And like the third time, Brian's like, listen, if you're not going to check her out, it's no problem. I'm just calling Clive, and Clive's going to sign her. And then, he obviously ran up and they ended up signing her. And then when Fast Car, that was actually the first single that they had, and it actually was recorded. They signed her to Elektra. And when they went up to play the record for everybody, they sat around the room. It was a room full of radio people, and everybody one by one, hot AC, pop, whatever, each area of subgenre of music said the same thing. This record's amazing. I love it, but I'm not going to be able to play it in my area of music. None of the stations are going to carry it. And one by one, they all said that. And Charles and Brian literally got up, ran out, left the office. Krasnow's chasing them down the street. And their response was, don't worry about it, Krasnow. I'm going to put up my own money and I'm going to get this to happen on my own. You're just going to have to pay me back when I'm done with this all. And they broke Fast Car without Elektra.
On what
No, it took a life of its own.
Was AOR playing it? Like, what radio format came on board with something so different that didn't fit anywhere?
I don't know who exactly played it at that point in time. I could probably call Les Garland and get an audible on that because Les was around in those days. So
just because the songs come back in such a big way, and don't really know the story of that song either, and it's such an unlikely hit.
Absolutely was unlikely hit.
All right. Well, as I told Tom Chewett at the beginning, this is the point where I'd like for him, who's been monitoring the questions, to maybe ask one, and I will catch up for a minute and be right back. Tom, have you found a good one in that?
Oh my God, this is spitter gold. David Fritz, this has been incredible. I'm so pleased that you could share all these great stories. Somebody asked a question earlier. They want to know a little bit more about the business model of Creative Intel. Is this a subscription, or how do you charge for your services and access to the platform?
Yeah, it's right now it's $30 a month. It's a 1-year commitment on the education, and you're going to need it because it's a lot there. We use a lot of animation to teach concepts. The animation's literally in the form of cartoons and also in the form of what we call playbooks. They're like graphic novels that you could see screen by screen and see the language that people are speaking to one another, and it's character driven, and storytelling, is used as part of that. So today it's a $30 a month model for education. When we go live before the end of the year, then there's going to be a tiered model of it'll be $50 a month and then $100 a month. And then it's going to be based on a point system of, if you're not using it that much, it'll only run you $50 a month. It'll cost more if you're, adding more contracts and more features, because it's very, very feature rich. But at the end of the day, the idea is that it's, not much more than $100 a month at the high end. And lawyers are always free, because we don't want anybody using the platform and saying, oh, well, I got to pay more to have my lawyer on this with me. I'm not doing that. So we want lawyers on it. We want lawyers, using it with and for their clients, because the reality is that, if you think about it, if you're a recording artist starting out, we got plenty of time on your hands, and it's a great time to learn the business, and you could self-manage your legal when nobody else is there to help you. But as you grow and you can actually afford a lawyer and actually, your career is growing, well, the last thing you need to be doing is working on your contracts. Your lawyer should be doing your contracts, because you got to be making art and breaking that art, marketing that art. So we want to get lawyers on this platform as soon as possible.
how
I'm
you
curious,
become, go on.
are lawyers, fellow lawyers in the industry saying, David, what the hell are you doing? I mean, this is DIY legal work here. You're taking money out of our pockets here.
You know, I have heard that, but I've heard more of, you know, when is this product coming? You got to take me out of my misery. I'm like stuck doing 1,000 producer agreements and I can't get it done. If you think about the practice of law, most entertainment lawyers are sole practitioners, 2-man shops, 3-man shops. So if I'm not doing the work and banging out language and revising drafts and on the phone negotiating deals, if I'm doing that, then I'm not going to get business. So I can do all my work and not get business, or I can go get all the business but not do the work. But to do both at the same time, if you're a small law firm, is really hard. And that's what the bulk of entertainment law is. So if we could take down the amount of time it takes to work on legal, well, then I think everybody wins. And you know, the law business is a business for the most part that's on a commission basis. So you know, if lawyers could get more done in a quicker manner, show me lawyers that get everything done at the end of the day, and it doesn't really last that long. Meaning, like, I don't get done every day everything that I intended to do that day. It's just an impossibility. But if I could speed up my workflow, I can, and I could focus on, you know, higher value, you know, bigger problems that need to be solved for my clients, and chasing business development, like going to find them more deals instead of and fine tuning stuff and just doing better, you know, just doing better rather than dealing with the minutia, just by saving time.
That's a great abundance mentality. That's seems to be rare in the field of law, though. Good on you. Really good.
Yeah, I think you know. Listen, you know, if people are going to get, you know, it will have impact on people that are charging for small stuff, but like, you know, should you really be paying $500 to do a confidentiality agreement? Or should that be like a low cost, no cost document? That's kind of the way I view it.
Janet Kirker's asking a question about possibly integrating Creative Intel into other entities in the business, like the MLC.
It's built on an API basis, so we could plug in any which way. We could plug our platform for the purposes of drafting into some other platform that has contract needs, or we could take the data from other platforms and populate it into ours. So it works data out and data in from the way that we built it.
Well, good on you. That's cool.
Thank you.
Hazan, those are most of the questions in the network, but I guarantee you plenty of people would love to hear some more stories about the Frank Sinatra mob hits is genius. I loved it.
We'll have to save that for David's book.
Yeah, when's that coming?
Oh my gosh. I don't have time. I got to make software first.
Well, folks, I'm afraid we're out of time. And to both of you, this has been awesome. I knew it was going to be. David, Fritz, I've had you on my radar for a long time. It's such a pleasure and honor to have you here. Hazan, you're always welcome back here with another great guest. And so the audience, I promised you'd leave here inspired and enlightened. I think we delivered on that today. And I hope to see some of you at Music Biz next week in Nashville. Hit me up if you're coming. And with that, I will say goodbye and be nice to each other.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, David.
Tom.
Have a good
Thanks,
day,
David.
everybody.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having us.
Bye-bye.
Take care.